We are committed to staying and delivering. All parties must ensure their safety and security.
But also the historical blame and shame of invading a neighboring country when its responsibility as a big country, as a permanent member of the Security Council, calls for it to work and help preserve peace and security, not to torpedo it.
No one could have predicted just how dangerous, inciting, and far-reaching President Putin's speech would be, with Putin arguing for taking the world back in time to an era of empires and colonies. The Security Council is charged with adjudicating threats to peace and security.
Russia is on the verge of provoking chaos in Ukraine and striking an unjustifiable blow to peace and security in the heart of Europe.
It is our collective responsibility, indeed our obligation here at this table, to maintain international peace and security, nothing less.
The situation is in danger of spiraling into a major crisis. We express our deep concern over the developments which, if not handled carefully, may well undermine the peace and security of the region. In the meantime, we strongly emphasize the vital need for all sides to maintain international peace and security by exercising the utmost restraint. I thank you.
In the present circumstances, the Security Council must act according to its main purpose, as holder of the primary responsibility under the United Nations Charter for the maintenance of international peace and security.
We note with concern the risk that an escalation of the situation in Ukraine holds for global peace and security.
When we consider the recent past of wars undertaken by choice, and when the Charter and international law were breached, eventually the safety and security of all parties was tragically undermined.
The international community focused with the same commitment, with the same ardor on the need for preserving peace and security. We, members of the Security Council, have the first responsibility for the maintenance of peace and international security. This creates the obligation to guarantee that the Security Council can perform its mandate and ensure the respect for the Charter of the United Nations.
We tried yesterday and today, before yesterday, to explain to you the logic of the decision made by Russia to recognize the LPR and DPR. And we focused on the need to ensure peace and security there.
The ambassador of the Russian Federation 3 minutes ago confirmed that his president declared a war on my country. So when I was coming here an hour ago or so, I was intending to ask the Russian ambassador to confirm on the record that the Russian troops will not start firing at Ukrainians today and go ahead with the offensive. It became useless 48 minutes ago. Because about 48 minutes ago, your president declared the war on Ukraine. So now I would like to ask the ambassador of the Russian Federation to say on the record that at this very moment, your troops do not shell and bomb Ukrainian cities, that your troops do not move in the territory of Ukraine. You have a smartphone, you can call Lavrov right now. We can make a pause to let you go out and call him. If you are not in a position to give an affirmative answer, the Russian Federation ought to relinquish responsibilities of the President of the Security Council, pass these responsibilities on to a legitimate member of the Security Council, a member that is respectful of the Charter,
Mr. President, we meet at the very moment of a military escalation we have not experienced in Europe for over a generation's time. The President of the Russian Federation announced a military operation on Ukrainian territory.
In my remarks tonight, I said that we predicted Russia's false flag attacks, the misinformation, the theatrical emergency meetings and the cyber attacks. But one piece had not come to pass. Unfortunately, while we've been meeting in the Security Council tonight, it appears that President Putin has ordered that last step. At the exact time as we are gathered in the council seeking peace, Putin delivered a message of war in total disdain for the responsibility of this council.
Do you see him trying to go beyond Ukraine? And a second question I'll just give to you now. This statement that he gave last night, the threat that he gave, the West will face consequences greater than any you have faced in history. Is he threatening a nuclear strike?
I have no idea what he's threatening. I know what he has done, number one.
This body, charged with maintaining international peace and security, was created to prevent exactly this kind of aggression from ever happening again.
People are being killed. A country in Europe is being destroyed. by a more powerful country, its neighbor, that has decided it wants to turn the historic clock backwards. A permanent member of the Security Council to whom the world has given power and trust to decide on peace and security.
We believe the Security Council should strive to show a united resolve in pursuing diplomatic solutions to all threats to international peace and security.
Not only violates the independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, it also constitutes a serious breach of international peace and security.
This Council has a responsibility to act in the face of conflict, to protect international peace and security, to uphold the principles the world agreed upon in response to the utter devastation of the Second World War.
The Russian Federation's actions, which have assailed the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations, have threatened the global order and the balance of peace and security. Its actions have fallen short of the higher standards expected of all those states that are considered as the enduring guardians of international peace and security.
Brazil regrets that the Security Council was unable to react to a breach of international peace and security that is still happening as we speak. Not even a different text would have been enough to allow the Council to fulfill its responsibility to maintain international peace and security today.
The serious developments in Ukraine, we all agree, undermine regional and international peace and security.
Due to the hasty and ill-considered intervention in Libya a decade ago. On that occasion, the African Union sought more time for diplomacy. Its counsel was ignored, and what resulted was not peace or the safety and security of the Libyan people. Instead, terror was unleashed on African peoples in the countries to the south of Libya.
Draft resolution of the Security Council that was submitted today. Why is it anti-Russian? I think that there is no need to explain. It suffices to have merely cast a cursory glance at the text. Why is it anti-Ukrainian? This is because the document, beyond any doubt, runs counter to the fundamental interest of the Ukrainian people insofar as it is an attempt to salvage and cement in Ukraine that system of power which brought the country to the point of tragedy, which has now been ongoing for at the very least 8 years now. We thank those who did not support this draft. I will not respond to those who just accuse the Russian Federation of abusing the veto right. Well, the main reason for a negative vote is not the fact that there is what is included in the draft, but what is left out. If its sponsors were to attempt to make it even remotely balanced, then they would not have left out issues which must be addressed and cannot be overlooked in the context of the Ukrainian problem. Specifically, they would not. What was left out is the fact that those who assumed and seized power as a result of the anti-constitutional coup in Kiev in February 2014, I refer to the Maidan junta, the way that they unleashed a war against the residents of the country's east, shelling residential areas with artillery pieces and multiple rocket launchers, raining bombs on the people of Donetsk and Lugansk. What was left out was the way that the Ukrainian authorities, with the encouragement of their Western patrons, consistently and cynically shirked their responsibility to implement the Minsk agreements, the linchpin of which was direct dialogue with the residents of the country's east. At the same time, what was positioned on the line of contact, the deployment of Ukrainian death squads comprised largely of radical neo-Nazi battalions, methodically, day after day, shelled the residential areas of DPR and LPR, killing women, children, and the elderly. And incidentally, this is ongoing today. Just today, 4 civilians died as a result of the actions of the Ukrainian armed forces. And how can we fail to mention the blood-chilling crimes by the Ukrainian nationalists as perpetrated over the past 8 years, the fact that the protesters against Maidan in Odessa were burned alive, the fact that peaceful protesters in Maidan were shot at by unknown snipers. The investigation into both of these tragedies is something that has been deliberately swept under the rug by the Maidan regime. At the same time, the culprits in the Odessa tragedy are well known. They are openly flaunting their presence. And yet an alternative investigation and the recognition by the snipers themselves unambiguously confirms that the slaughter on the at Independence Square was a provocation by the leaders of Maidan. We specifically last year carried out an informal Security Council meeting, an ARIA formula meeting on both of these issues, with the aim of sharing with Security Council colleagues more information about this. And yet in response, at best, what we heard from Western partners were merely hackneyed cliches about so-called Russian propaganda. How can there be a resolution on the Ukrainian issue without these above-mentioned issues being mentioned? It would have been wise to include in the draft an honest assessment of the role of Western colleagues in inflating this Ukrainian crisis. Not only did they stand behind the Maidan coup, but they also effectively issued a carte blanche to Kiev to carry out any acts, any steps that would be unthinkable for any civilized state. And this includes the egregious discrimination against the Russian language and consequently Russian language speakers. This includes glorification of Hitler's henchmen aligned alongside the prohibition on processions to honor the real heroes of Ukraine who freed it of Nazism, as well as the religious schism in that country. As you spin tales about the triumph of democracy in Ukraine, the Maidan authorities and nationalists have been, with impunity, murdering their political opponents. We see the way the situation is being exploited in propagandistic exercises by Western politicians and media outlets. I would like to ask you, where were you 8 years ago? Why were you unmoved when there was murder and artillery strikes in Donbass? Why didn't you even bother to notice that there are more than 4 million people living in DPR and in LPR who at best were branded pro-Russian separatists? Why didn't you repudiate Poroshenko when he said that the residents of Donbass would rot in basements? Or Zelensky, why didn't you repudiate him when they called them non-people and specimens?
We voted yes, also having in mind the justifications for past interventions by other powerful states, using resolutions from this very council that seriously compromised international peace and security.
Well, no, in terms of these sanctions, we've seen sanctions get imposed on after Georgia in 2008, after Crimea in 2014, election hacking in 2016.
Nothing like this. Look, you have two options. Start a third world war, go to war with Russia physically, or two, make sure that a country that acts so contrary to international law ends up paying a price for having done it.